Okay, so thank you once again, everyone, for joining the training. This is the mandatory training for, is required by DOT for employees with CDL. And the first part, of course, was Ashley with our employee assistance program, employee care. She went over the effects of drugs and alcohol in the workplace. And now we're going to take the opportunity to go over some city policies. Before we do that, we're going to invite Melanie Everhart. She is with Concentra, which is our occupational health center. And she's just going to take a few minutes to discuss the process, the collection process, which a lot of you are already familiar with. But she'll just talk about that, and we'll go on and let Melanie get started here.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to step through the drug and alcohol testing process. First of all, when you're called for your random, the randoms are managed by a Fmcsa, that's Concentra Medical Compliance Administration. The randoms are done quarterly. It's a secure process. Fmcsa ensures that the selection process follows the requirements that are outlined by the Department of Transportation. Once you're pulled for that random, of course, you're directed to go to one of the centers for the either breath alcohol or drug screen or both. You will arrive at the clinic. You are given your paperwork to complete. Make sure to always bring your photo ID with you. An authorization is either sent with you or ahead of time from your employer. You'll be registered. If you're ordered to have a breath alcohol test and a drug screen, the breath alcohol test will be done first. That is required. The only time we wouldn't do that is if there was something going on in the clinic that prevented that from taking place, such as a malfunctioning equipment, et cetera. But otherwise, your breath alcohol test would be done first if it's needed. Then you'll go on to your drug screen. And I'll step through both of those in just a moment. Once your drug screen's completed, it goes to the lab, and then it's reported back to the employer. The results are, if something should show up in the drug screen, then the medical review officer has a process that they follow. You would be contacted first and asked about any recent medical treatment, any prescriptions, any recent diet changes. They have predetermined steps that they follow to give you the opportunity to give feedback about your drug screen results. Once they determine the final result, then of course that's resulted out to the city of Kettering. I'll start now with the BAT process. So if you come in for your breath alcohol test, it's recommended that, try not to have gum, mints, those kinds of things in your mouth when you come in. If so, we will just ask you to spit them out, but we will proceed with the testing. You will have a breath alcohol sheet that you're going to review the information to make sure the employer is correct, your name's correct, your identification, whether it's you use on the breath alcohol form, you can use your driver's license or your social or your employee ID. You want to make sure that's correct, as well as the contact at your employer. And so on one of the steps first step that you'll take on that breath alcohol form is to verify that information, and you're signing that information is correct. So please make sure that you pay close attention to that, because that's the prime opportunity to correct anything should anything be wrong on the form. So you're going to verify that information is correct, sign it. You'll be asked to use the mouthpiece to blow into the machine. The result will come up on the machine. We print it off and put it on your form. If you are negative, then the breath alcohol technician will sign the form. And then you're given a copy, and a copy goes to the employer, and a copy is kept in the clinic. If for whatever reason your results are 0.02 or higher, then you will be asked to stay in the room with a breath alcohol technician for 15 minutes. Neither one of you can leave the room during that time, so you can't proceed with your drug screen or get that done. You have to stay in that room. And then they'll do a confirmation test. And once the confirmation test is done, if it should be negative, then you'll be again be given your copies and you'll be on your way. If it's the 0.02 or greater, then you will be asked to sign the bottom of the form, just verifying that those are your results and that you agree to not operate heavy equipment or machinery, and you won't drive, and you'll sign the form. And again, the copies of the results will be distributed. If someone's positive, we would immediately call the employer to let them know. And then if you're there for a drug screen, we would proceed on with the drug screen at that point. Any questions about any of that I've gone over so far? I think most of you probably have already been here a couple of times, probably if you've been there a long time, and so you're used to the process. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. The next part is you would go to the lab, and you're going to be asked to empty out your pockets. You'll be asked to lock your items up in a locker or drawer, depending on what clinic you're in. You'll be able to keep your wallet. You'll have to remove outer clothing. Let me back up. A jacket, an outer, like a jacket this time of the year, or hat. If you've got a hat on, you'll be asked to remove those. Lock your stuff up. You'll be asked to wash your hands. And then at that point, again, you're going to now look in the computer to verify your information. And I can't stress enough, again, to make sure you're looking at that, to make sure all of your information, your employer information, and your personal information is correct. That's the best time to do that. And so if it's correct, then you're going to be given a cup. You're going to be asked to go into the restroom, and there will be bluing in the toilet. You'll be asked to provide a urine sample. We usually will draw a line on the cup. They'd like to get 60 mLs if they can. We're required to send off 2 bottles, one with 30 mLs and one with 15. So we like to try to get a little extra if we can, so that it doesn't result in an insufficient specimen. So you'll go in, you'll provide your urine, you'll bring it out to the technician. They check for a temperature, make sure nothing looks adulterated. And then they will pour that off into 2 bottles. They will seal that, both bottles. They will date it, and they will ask you to then initial the bottles, verifying that everything was done in your presence in front of you. They will then print off the chain of custody out of the computer. You will get a copy. One will go into the specimen bag with the specimens to the lab. And then, of course, one goes back to the employer as well. And within 24 to 48 hours, the results should be back to the employer, unless there's something that still needs further tested, or the MRO is waiting to talk to you about that. Make sure again, that you're bringing the license. I know on the drug screen chain of custody form, they're asking for the driver's license number to be used on the chain of custody form now. So that will be on there. So make sure you have that with you. Any questions? Anything I've skipped over, or anybody have anything they want to ask about? No. Okay. I think that's all I have. And if you do end up having any questions, feel free to let anybody in your HR department know, and they can pass that back to us, and we'd be glad to get an answer for you.
All right. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Okay. You are so welcome.
Taking the time to walk us through that.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so And now we'll just take the opportunity to go over some of the city policies that relate to this. In your packets that you would have received, on the right-hand side is a copy of all the policies that relate to this. We have policy 401 for safety, 402 alcohol and drug use, 405 medical examinations, 407 the employee assistance program, which Ashley talked about earlier. And then policy 408 is the alcohol and drug policy for employees who operate commercial motor vehicles. So this particular policy 408 is what we're going to spend the time talking about this morning. But so we're just going to go over some things. We got Jenny, our HR director, and then Patty, one of our managers, and myself will just take a few minutes to highlight some things in the policy. Okay.
Thanks, Lori. This is Patty, as many of you know. And as Lori mentioned, we are talking this morning specifically about policy 408. But before we get started, I want to thank everybody for joining us and thank Lori and the other members of HR for putting this all together. In the policy, I want to go through what the purpose of this policy is. It's basically to comply with all of the federal regulations for employees who operate commercial motor vehicles. Those regulations require the city to provide this information and training to the employees. Employees will be held accountable for any violation of this policy. And our main concern is the safety of all the employees and the citizens of Kettering. In section 6, or actually number 6 of the first section, as you saw in the video, any employee who thinks they have an alcohol or drug problem are urged to voluntarily seek help from our EAP. Our EAP is there for you. We do not know who goes to EAP. We see numbers, but we're encouraging anyone that suspects they have a problem to take full advantage of the EAP. Under number 8, we brought this up last time. This was added to the policy. We want to make sure that you know that legalization of marijuana use or via a prescription from a doctor does not modify these regulations. Marijuana is still classified as a controlled substance and its use is prohibited in the workplace. In addition, regarding CBD products, extracts of CBD may be contaminated with THC. And what that means is that the use of CBD oil may trigger a positive drug test. And ODAX, our testing company, has seen this happen. So we wanted to make you aware of that. Covered employees, this policy applies to all employees who operate commercial motor vehicles as a requirement of their job. And the policy goes on to defines what a commercial motor vehicle is. Jenny's going to continue by describing safety sensitive functions.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there with us through this training. So I'm on page 3 in the safety sensitive functions. I think a lot of people are under the misunderstanding that a safety sensitive function just happens from the time you get behind the wheel and start operating your commercial motor vehicle. And that's not the case. Basically, your safety sensitive capacity starts from the time you come on to your shift. So it includes time waiting to be dispatched, anytime doing your pre-duty trip inspection, even receiving receipts for loads or dealing with a commercial motor vehicle accident. So safety sensitive is basically from the time you come on to shift to the time you leave. Even time that may be spent supervising employees is considered safety sensitive. So moving on to section D in the policy, prohibited conduct. So the conduct described in section D is it's prohibited not only under city policy, but under the Fmcsa. So things that are prohibited, no employee or driver shall report for duty or remain on duty while having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.04 or higher. Lori will go into some more detail of what happens if you blow between a 0.02 and 0.039. No employee shall possess alcohol, use alcohol while at work. You can't drive within 4 hours of consuming any alcohol. And then you can't consume alcohol for 8 hours after an accident occurs. No employee or driver can refuse to submit to any type of drug and alcohol testing. And no employee driver shall report to duty or remain on duty when using any drug that's not legally prescribed and being used as prescribed by your doctor. One thing to be cognizant of when you do go see your doctor, make sure that that medical provider knows what your job is. Describe your duties so that they can work with you to describe or to prescribe what's best so that it doesn't affect your ability to work, and then also make sure to have conversations with supervisors. Part E, I'm going to skip over that because that has to do with supervisor and manager responsibilities, which we covered on Tuesday. So I'll turn it over to Lori now.
Okay, so we'll just take some time to talk about the different types of alcohol and drug testing that's covered under Fmcsa. First of all, we have pre-employment and pre-duty testing. So this is any new employee that we're going to hire, or perhaps a current employee who's going to be moving into a safety sensitive position would have to have a pre-employment or a pre-duty test, would be drug and alcohol for that position. Then we have post-accident testing. So any employee or driver who is involved in an accident involving a commercial motor vehicle while performing safety sensitive functions could be need to have a post-accident drug and alcohol test. So a couple of things you can read through those bulleted items. If there's a loss of human life, that test is going to be necessary. If perhaps a vehicle has to be towed away, it's not able to be driven, would bring about a post-accident test. If there's a citation to the driver, to the employee, there would be a test. And you can read where the citation would be within 8 hours for breath alcohol, 32 hours for drug. Now the city does operate on err on the side of caution, and we usually would do a post-accident in these situations as well. We have random testing. We do comply with the DOT regs right now for 2022. That would be 50% of the CDL holders here at the city through the year. 50% would be tested for urine drug screens, and 10% would have breath alcohol testing done. And Melanie described what that process is. Of course, we also work with Concentra through ODAX to have on-site random, but the situation would be the same, the testing. Reasonable suspicion testing. A couple of the videos this morning, the one showed where someone had shown up at work and there was cause for reasonable suspicion. This would be if a trained city official had basis for reasonable suspicion, could document that, an employee would have a reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol test. We have return to duty testing. If anyone is not able to, they have to be referred to a substance abuse professional, such as through the EAP program, because of some violation. Before they return to work, they have to have a return to duty test. And these are under direct observation by a medical professional. Then once that employee is returned to work, they would also have to have follow-up testing. And this is per DOT guidelines, and that is set by the substance abuse professional as to how many tests for the amount of time that employee would have to be pulled for. And again, these would be under direct observation of a medical professional. And of course, we do all the tests are done in accordance with the Fmcsa rules. And we do comply with that. You have the split sample, and that's all part of the DOT regulations. Okay. So I think Patty is going to talk next.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to pick up with refusal to submit to alcohol or drug test on section G. A refusal to submit to an alcohol or drug test is basically a violation of the Fmcsa rules. Section 2 describes specifically what a refusal is. There's many ways an employee can refuse. Simply put, all employees must cooperate with the testing procedure. And number 3 specifically defines the consequences of a refusal. And basically what it states is that an employee who refuses to comply shall be subject to discipline up and including to dismissal. So you want to make sure that you're aware that you cannot refuse a test. And if you do, the consequences will apply. I'm going to pass it back over to Jenny.
All right, so I'm going to cover the 4 things that the city is required to do for minimum consequences under Fmcsa for employees who violate the policy. Number 1, you must be removed from all safety sensitive functions and placed on a leave of absence. It's at the city manager's discretion to determine whether that would be paid or unpaid. Second thing we are mandated to do is refer the employee to a substance abuse professional who will determine next steps for that employee. Third thing, employee can't be returned to work until they pass a return to duty drug and or alcohol test. And lastly, they would then be subject to follow-up testing unannounced, minimum of 6 tests during the first 12 months of the driver's return to work. Lori.
Okay, so next, and Jenny had referenced it a little bit earlier in the policy, what happens if an employee has a breath alcohol test that falls between 0.02 but less than 0.04. So a positive test is defined by the Fmcsa as having an alcohol concentration of 0.04 or greater. However, the Fmcsa has also specified that if an employee would happen to blow with a concentration between 0.02 or greater, but less than 0.04, then that individual has to be removed from safety sensitive duties that day until their next scheduled work day, but not less than 24 hours. So that is not just a city rule, that is per DOT guidelines. And if this were to happen, the employee could be subject to discipline. Now, employee requested confirmation testing. Again, that's where that split sample comes in, that the DOT does require all urine drug screens to have a split sample. So, you know, the employee can, if something were to show up in the first sample, the employee would have that option of having the split sample sent to another lab. And as that next paragraph highlights, that would be within 72 hours that the MRO notified the employee of the positive sample. So That's what that split sample is for.
All right, the next section is confidentiality. Your drug and alcohol lab results are never placed in your personnel file. We have separate medical and drug and alcohol files over in HR that are kept confidential and separate from your regular personnel file. Secondly, information is disclosed on a need to know basis. So we try to keep that circle as tight as we possibly can and only work with the supervisors that need to know what's happening. Section L goes over FMCSA mandated alcohol drug evaluation and treatment. Ashley just spent the first hour of this presentation talking about that. So I don't intend to go into any further detail there. I think she did a fair job covering all of that. This brings us to page 11. We're almost there on the second to last page of the policy. Section M discusses additional drug and alcohol information. Basically, this section just lets you know if you need to see any of the DOT rules and regulations, anything regarding FMCSA mandated testing. Lori keeps copies of those over in HR. So if you want to look at any of that, please feel free to stop by and we're happy to provide you with that information. And again, just want to urge employees that may be dealing with drug and or alcohol dependence issues to seek treatment before it leads to any type of disciplinary action. So we have some great resources here at the city. We do have an EAP program. Like Patty said, it's a confidential program. We do not see names, we see numbers and categories of things. So EAP is confidential. We also have some amazing resources through United Healthcare. So please take advantage of those. You're always, again, welcome to stop over to HR and we can try to direct you to the help that you need. Lastly, I just want to point out we spent some time with supervisors on Tuesday going over this. Supervisors are mandated to report employees who they believe are in violation of these policies, but you as employees are required to report that as well. So you're out there, you're working side by side with one another. If you suspect anything, please report that to supervision. Lori's going to bring us home.
All right, so the final point in the policy refers to the commercial driver's license drug and alcohol clearinghouse. So just so everyone understands, that's fairly new. Within a couple, 3 years, I guess it's been in operation. And it's basically a national database that all employers are mandated to report certain things to. So what is reported to the clearinghouse? So for example, if a person would have a positive adulterated or substituted drug test result, the MRO, that's the laboratory, they would report that to the clearinghouse. If an individual had that breath alcohol that they had that 0.04 or higher, that would be reported to the clearinghouse. If you refuse to take a test, that is reported to the clearinghouse. If an individual does have to go see a substance abuse professional, then the SAP, they would report certain things to the clearinghouse, such as when that individual has taken a return to duty, the results of the return to duty test, what their follow-up program is, and the results of all those tests. Then once an individual has been cleared and they're back to, they've completed that program with the SAP, that's reported to the clearinghouse. So those are the type of things. It's fairly new, but we just want everyone to understand what that database is used for and what is reported there. But again, that also has confidentiality. Individuals do have to give certain releases to employers to see the full report. So any questions, comments, or anything? Okay, Jenny, any final words?
Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. Like we said at the beginning, this is mandated every 3 years. So Everyone should be good until 2025. We're here. We are a resource to all of you. So if you need anything, please stop by, call, email us. And then don't forget to sign certifying that you have attended the training and received the policies. So be safe, and thank you all again.
Thank you very much, everyone.